I will call the June 19th, 2023 meeting of the Fairport Industrial Development Agency to order. And first order of business is to welcome our newest board member to the IDA board, Jennifer Townsend. We're pleased to have her. And we know that you're going to be a great contributor. What I would say is, at any point during any of these meetings, if you have a question, stop us. You know, you're the new kid, and so we don't want to have you scratching your head and try to remember to ask about it later. So just go ahead and ask a question during the thing. What are we talking about? So with that, then I'll open the public comments. Oh, I'm sorry. You wanted us to go officers first.
Sure.
Okay, so we have a couple of, with the retirement of Ken Rohr, we have a couple of changes we'll need to make. He was on the, he was vice chair and also served on the finance committee and the audit committee. So we will need to replace him on all of those slots. As far as vice chair, Leslie has made it known that she would be interested in assuming that position. Which I'm certainly good with, but if there's anyone else that would like to do that, or anybody on the board that has any comments on it, we would welcome that.
I support Leslie's character as vice.
I certainly would as well.
Okay. Do we need motions on those?
Yep.
Okay, so could we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks, Leslie. You don't have to change chairs. You don't have to have Ken seat.
You don't want me to wrestle a new girl out of her chair or anything.
So thank you. Thanks for offering to do that, because there are times that I'm not here. The vice chair takes over those meetings as well as challenges me on things. So with that, we have 3 different committees, and while we're replacing spots on 2 of those committees, we probably want to look at all 3 committees and see the makeup of that, see if anybody's overloaded on committee assignments and how we want to do it, and what we can stick Jennifer with. So, so thoughts on that. The governance committee did not have Ken, but Leslie and Donna, who are on all 3 of those committees, so they probably, I don't know. We can, and Jen, maybe a governance, let's do a governance committee. Rob chairs that, and none of these committees involve a huge amount of time commitment, but they are important things that we do.
I would like to say Jennifer's got quite a bit of board experience as well already. She's been on the Breast Cancer Coalition, Path Stone Foundation, and there was one other one.
And just the Town of Parrington Sustainability Board.
Right. So I think as a governance, that's a great slot.
Sure. I'd be open to that.
Sound good, Rob?
Yeah, perfect.
So then of Donna and Leslie, anyone like to take the opportunity to remove themselves from that board or that committee?
You're not.
It says that.
No, I just don't want to walk off on the camera.
Since he's in
What did you decide?
So I'll remove myself from the governance.
Okay, so so Donna is removing herself from that committee.
Okay.
All right. And so then as we go to finance and audit, typically those have been the same members, because they're similar things, and they share joint meetings for those. Ken was on each of those. I'm happy to sit in on one of those committees and take a slot, or Rob, if we want to do that.
So with the governance committee, my recollection is this also was outdated, right? Donna, had you previously
Yeah.
begged it off? You were off of the committee
Yeah.
already, and Kevin, you were already playing that role.
Right.
I don't know if you were formally.
That's right. That's because, well, since we made that change, there has not been a meeting. I wasn't involved.
That was the one where we had the meetings, the
You're right.
conclusion of the meeting
You're right.
minutes.
Yeah.
But we had,
Yes. So it is me, so, so then Leslie, you could be off of that committee too. If you would like.
That one committee or both committees is my next
I
question.
meant off of governance.
Oh, off of governance. Oh, I see.
And then just,
Streamlines a little
And
bit.
that would be Rob, Jen, and you.
correct.
Interesting. I will take that opportunity for fear of never come again.
Mike Van Anderson?
Covered. Okay, so you have that one then, you know that.
So the
is, right?
governance, we have Rob as chair, Jennifer and Kevin,
Mhm.
is that correct? Okay, thank you. And then the audit,
Thoughts on audits?
Donna is
Donna,
our
can we ask you
secretary
to,
treasurer.
can we ask you to chair
Yeah.
each of those committees?
yeah, I'd be happy to.
And so you do need, and Leslie, are you okay staying on those two?
Sure.
So we need a third member for that, and I can do it or Rob can do it. So,
If you've got bandwidth and you want to do it, by all means. Or if you want to split that up, I know we traditionally.
no, I don't think we want to split them up.
I wouldn't want to take on, personally for me right now, I don't want to take on being on every single thing or committee for you.
Okay, I'll do it. And I think then maybe Jennifer will at some point be able to move into those.
So just for my note taking, Rob is chair of governance with Jennifer and Kevin.
Correct.
The audit committee is Donna as chair, Leslie and Kevin. Right?
And the finance.
Pardon?
And
And
the
the
But
same-
that's only the LDC, so.
All right.
So maybe, so I think we're good and can do a motion on that.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Any more discussion regarding any of that? Thank you all for your service. All in favor? Aye. Okay. That's, and so now we can open the public comment portion of the meeting and ask if there's anyone that would like to speak to the board other than agenda people. Hearing no one and seeing no one, I'll close public comment section and we'll move on to approval of the May 15th, 2023 IDA minutes. And the four of us were here that are able to vote on that. You will abstain. So is there a motion on those minutes?
Chair, I do note one correction as to the guests that were present at the meeting should have included Peter Bars of BME and David Cruz.
Oh, I see those in our corrected
Becerra.
versions. Yep, as corrected. Any other comments, corrections, discussion on those minutes? All in favor? Aye.
I'm sorry, who was the second in the minutes? Donna, thank you.
And one abstention.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so now we will go to move into the financial reporting. Let's start with Megan, just to,
Sure.
so they can, you know, sit through all of our other
Good
stuff.
afternoon. My name is Megan Burke, Tompkins Financial Advisors. We oversee the treasury portfolio for Fairport IDA. And I'm going to introduce Mike Lawhead. He is part of our investment committee and our portfolio manager for us here in Western New York. So with that, I will introduce Mike.
Great to be with everybody. Just in terms for my familiarity, is there a topic or topics of particular interest other than just kind of the portfolio, how it's situated, any interest or preference for kind of economic overview. If not, I'm happy to kind of dive right into
The
it.
overview is great, and if we have questions as we go, we're gonna jump right in.
Okay,
That's okay.
sure. So coming out of last year, with the Federal Reserve having hiked interest rates over 5% on the short end of the Treasury curve, the benefit of owning short-dated Treasuries is that the yield to maturities within this portfolio are still north of 5%. All as maturities come due, whether they're reinvested or if there's liquidity needs from your side, it's always helpful to know kind of as we anticipate where different constraints on the portfolio, what amounts should be reinvested, what amounts we should kind of keep on the sidelines as they come due. But there's 3 bonds in particular maturing in 2023, so there's plenty of liquidity coming due in the short to intermediate term, along with all these being daily liquid. So there's no liquidity issues or constraints should you need more liquidity in the short to intermediate term. More recently, the Fed has decided to pause their interest rate hikes for this month at least. Remains to be seen the scale at which they may continue through the end of this year and into the next calendar year. The reasons for the latest pause in interest rate hikes being that as a result of the debt ceiling being lifted, there's about $400 billion worth of liquidity that needs to be, or bonds that need to be issued from the Treasury. So hiking interest rates right at the same time that they would love to have a low interest rate, those don't go hand in hand. So we certainly understand and acknowledge why they paused this at this rate. On the inflation side of things, that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. So with increasing interest rates, the expectation is that there will continue to be a more moderating level of inflation. And while we have seen a decrease from roughly 10% about 12 to 18 months ago down to right around 5% here still today, it's a long ways from their target of 2%. So there's still a lot of work left to be done on the inflation side. So we're pleased, of course, as consumers and as investors with the progress that's been made thus far. But there's still quite a bit of wood left to be chopped, so to speak. So I'll pause there. Happy to take questions or give anything more specific should be helpful.
For the benefit of our newest board members, you just want to touch on, and I'm not sure if anyone is covered with you on the constraints that Frank just mentioned, that we are able to invest in as a public agency. Just kind of let her know how that works.
You might be educating me as well. So my level of familiarity with the portfolio is that it is entirely invested in treasuries. So constraints beyond that, unless you have anything in specific, I kind of manage to the mandate that's been provided to me. So
We follow the New York State Comptroller's requirements for government municipal funds.
okay,
And so those have very specific prohibited investments. And also things about, I often communicate with, not often, I communicate with Megan with regard to where our cash, even to the point where our cash account is.
okay.
It's certain banks and so forth.
Certain money market funds.
So
Okay.
it's not very fun portfolio, but
Oh, well,
it's performing nicely.
at 5% treasury rates, they're quite a bit more fun today.
Yeah.
This year it's good.
I have a question with that. I see that like some of the ones with the like lowest yields, they're coming due, if I understand this right. So but the ones that we still have, like the ones that are around 2% and 1.5%, do we have the option to like sell bonds early without penalty and then buy higher performing, like the higher interest rate ones, or is that not something?
So aside from any specific constraints in terms of trading, as a bond that moves lower in price than the yield to maturity, that becomes the number that as an investor that I would be most focused on, as opposed to the current yield, which depending on which number you're pointing to specifically, the current yield may be lower, but the yield to maturity, so that as we get the principal repaid over time, we're actually netting out at the same if we were to just sell bond A that might have moved lower in price, to sell that and then buy a bond that has a higher current yield. The trade-off there is de minimis. this, you end up getting the same return over the life of the kind of the investment period. And we can go into a little more detail on that if that's helpful.
If this is right, if we wanted to sell it ahead of time, the market's only gonna give us a net amount. We can't sell it for the face amount because it hasn't matured yet. So
Correct.
we're not gonna get anything. The market will take care of that.
So there's no penalty except for the lack of full value we would get if we made a change.
Yep, you would, in practice, you would realize the loss as you redeem the bond, and then you go to buy kind of the higher yielding one, which in this instance tends to be the shorter maturities. If you were to hold the life of what would be the longer dated bond, you'll end up within a fraction of kind of where the improvement in yield would be. So you're not going to really see much of a benefit to doing so in terms of returns.
And then this month we have a couple of reports, right? We have our standard monthly report, which shows us the sort of the year to date from January 1. And I asked Megan if she could provide us with a report. That second report you see is activity since our October 1 start of our fiscal year. So that's the difference in those two reports. And so the inflows and outflows also during that same time period, as you recall, at one point we moved out of the managed portfolio and into the brokerage account. So that's not to be alarming here. The inflows and outflows, it's just the movement of the money between the two accounts.
Page 5 shows the portfolios, just a summary of the portfolio. It might be helpful. It might be too much information, but nonetheless, if you're kind of thinking or interested in looking at the current yield to maturity or yield to worst, use those interchangeably. But 3.6% is the yield to maturity on the portfolio. So for a portfolio that has a duration slightly above 12 months, that's right in line with what we would expect at this point in time.
We do have some capital outlays later this fall, we expect. So we just took into cash a maturing 50,000. Our next up is 175, I think, in August, and that'll come out of the investment portfolio and park it at C&B and look for a CD or something at that time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Anything? Yeah, you got it.
All right.
Thank you for
great.
coming in.
Of course.
Have a great evening.
Thanks too. Okay, so now we can move to resolution 2023-06, authorizing payments of the IDA bills.
I've reviewed the bills and I would move payment of the June bills.
Second that.
Any discussion or question regarding or anything, Martha, that you want to add to any of the IDA bills? I mean, we see that Josh Landscape is the biggest part of it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Those are the North Main parking lot and the Butterfly Garden.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Move to the financials for the IDA or P&L, cash and investments, cash balances, and some of that is what we just covered on the investment side. There was, once I was finally able to download, you highlighted something with a question.
One of the things I'd like to point out is on the pilot payments, the rental pilot payments, is that includes the renegotiated lease we had with Packett's Property, where it's more mark to market versus a whole. We used to have a $1 figure for the entire year. So this is a mark to market. They're paying market rate on that.
What, that's what it was. What went into, on the expense side, on the repair and maintenance of $13,000?
Josh Landscaping.
Okay, because then the checks weren't adding up to that, so I thought it was, but
This month's check's not, to the 12, okay.
because there's like
So that's, 8.
$8,700 worth of Josh Landscaping bills that were paid.
One moment,
So that's
please.
why I was questioning it.
I can get that in a minute. There was a 5291, 1189, and 5291. So, all right, Chair, how about if I look into that?
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have anything on financial statements? Any questions, comments? That's it for financials. We can move on to old business, and we have 3 things that we are carryovers from last month's meeting. And so, first one on the agenda is GPI regarding the Thomas Creek wetlands entrance that we've been talking about. Tom Malinsky is.
And board package included the preliminary sketch. On Friday, I met with Bob Blood of GPI. And so what you have in front of you is some visuals of the existing conditions and then an updated drafted preliminary concept of the colored one in front of you. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you for having me here. If you recall, we put together a proposal for the design of this, and this is our 5th phase since the inception a long time ago when I originally started this project. And what we looked at and what we talked to Martha about was just as an overall process to look at was to have a goal of this would be a basis for a funding application to look at some planning associated to upgrade it. It would identify, provide some additional identity to the area. As you go back and look Bridge Lane into that area, you're wondering where you're going until you finally get to that parking area. So really deserves to be cleaned up and signage there, a little bit of maintenance and such, and that was a goal in there. Some accessibility relative to parking and pedestrian accessibility, some public art potential in there also. There's some utility work potentially also and some options associated with that. And then ultimately some of the Thomas Creek wetlands interpretive signage that we've talked about and looked at that. So there's a lot of different opportunities here. As Martha mentioned, Bob Blood from our firm, a landscape architect, a lot of years of experience, came and visited the site and reviewed all of the previous plans and such and concepts and came up with this concept after several iterations, and we got some real good input, the collaborative project and going through it in several iterations of it. So originally we talked about mainly concentrating around the parking area, but I think Martha had a real good point that it really deserves to start further back as the split from where the roadway and the driveways from Lift Bridge Lane and the access into this. So we did extend it back to that, looked at, trying to, as I mentioned, clean up the area there. There's a lot of secondary growth and just scrub in that area. So the intent of that, adding some landscaping at that entrance, signage, just creating that entrance and continuing the potentially some new asphalt. Did you guys talk about that? And it's really not labeled on here.
New asphalt or the sidewalk?
Or we're not repaving any of the,
No.
okay,
I didn't anticipate.
yeah, okay. So adding a sidewalk to the south of the driveway as it's coming in, the pedestrian access, because it is a little confusing as you go down through there. And you have the interaction between potential cars coming in and the pedestrians and the bicyclists coming down through there. So adding that, we noted as concrete in here. I don't know if you guys talked about the asphalt versus concrete, but depending upon costs and the original concepts, in my opinion, based the cost on the concrete, more expensive, and there's an option if you needed to back off and put asphalt.
We could even do stone dust.
Exactly, stone dust, exactly.
Yeah,
So-
everything else in there is stone dust.
Right.
Exactly. We tried not to really encroach beyond the current parking gravel area that's out there, maintain that as much as possible, with the exception maybe some of the parking just to the north of that gravel area, which originally was planned way back when, with the plans really never created as part of that. But we tried to be kind of conservative relative to parking and not over park it relative to the use. And a lot of it is pedestrian traffic that's coming through, or people on the canal path walking through, and looked at the visual side of it coming through. And as you're driving, identifying the parking, providing that continuous loop relative to potential maintenance around there, maintaining the gravel parking area or gravel lot itself, improving the parking areas with a product that is out there now. It's True Grid material, which is a plastic material that buried, the gravel is infilled to the plastic material. It expands out. Here's an example of True Grid, and what it has as an option is you can put little domes or plastic fillers to identify the parking spaces. You don't have, it's a way to delineate those spaces.
Right, because if it's gravel, you can't stripe it. This remains, with using those, it's a permeable surface, which is
Correct.
great. And what I've read, it does, snow plows is not a big deal. So it's kind of little innovation that we're not used to. And we're using it.
Plowing is actually going to get done back there.
I'm sorry?
Not sure how much plowing they do back.
Oh, they
there
do. There's quite a bit of,
on the walkway.
on the walkway, no, well, they do keep Thomas Creek wetlands, the parking lot plowed. There's quite a bit of snow storage. I talked to Bob about, and you'll see evidence when you're out there where they do the snow storage, so. But I just think that's kind of just it's a small area we're talking about, because this will be new to us, but I think it's a great opportunity to be a little innovative. It's
Mhm.
very it's very discreet, I guess.
Exactly. It blends in, and as Martha says, it's permeable also, which is important to be environmentally conscious, adjacent to the wetlands and such. So we have a total of 10 parking spaces identified, 4 of which are handicap spots, which are conforming to current requirements associated with the loading and unloading areas for each one of those. They would be delineated with signage to restrict it and provide that accessibility to the boardwalks as well as the butterfly garden in that area.
And this is quite a bit less parking than was originally planned in 1996, right?
Correct. Yes.
It was really double loaded and
We've become much more walkable.
yes.
Exactly.
Which, to that point, are there bike racks?
We do have one. It's right there at the, adjacent to the trail at the Butterfly Garden. You could certainly look at putting more in.
Mhm.
Oh, an existing, there's,
Yes.
One of the things we talked about, Bob and I and Tom, we talked about trying to minimize maintenance. Right now, there's
very
rotted
important.
bollards out there, wooden bollards. We've talked about replacing those with stones. We have quite a bit of stone left over still out on our parking lot on North
Right.
Main there that was
Exactly.
salvaged from the canal project.
Mhm.
So we talked about that. I showed Bob the 2 shivs or the big wheels from the bridge. Thought maybe we could do something with that out there possibly. But he did a nice job in incorporating things, especially what Tom and Bob pointed out is on this, as you're coming down off the canal to the left-hand side, there's actually a hillside there with a lot of undergrowth that when we clean that out, it's really going to be a nice area. It was a nice feature that I didn't know was there because of all the undergrowth, and it'll improve the sight lines tremendously.
Exactly.
The bikes, it's scary coming down that hill, not knowing what you're going to find.
Right.
That curve.
Mm-hmm. True.
We talked about trying to move utility poles or guy wires. That's why the sidewalk kind of meanders a little bit.
And taking the existing utility pole and possibly incorporating an art feature on or around the pole itself, painting it or doing something a little bit different to attract some more attention to the area and utilize that.
We talked about relocating the light. There's a single coach light out there. We don't want any more light because in theory the park is closed at dusk. So we're not trying to attract people after dark. So just that one. There is additional lighting, but we're not going to be FMC lighting very high up near the webcam. But we're not going to be adding more lighting here. So I think you had a budget, draft budget.
Right. We looked at this and put together an overall draft budget. Just a real conceptual budget with demo and site prep, sidewalk installation, parking installation, some landscaping, and amenities, and came up to around $70,000 with a 20% contingency of around $84K in that area. So we're talking under $100,000, just round numbers, with the potential of in-kind services, and depending on how you wanted to break this up.
That's kind of where I started talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Are there items or features that you?
The question with the butterfly garden, are we pleased with the visibility and the attractability of that, or is there anything we can do to enhance it so that more people know that it's there, more people get to the sundial, or is that intended to come pretty much off the towpath?
One of the things we are working on is adding additional signage to explain to people what it is and how the sundial works and how the butterfly garden works. We're working that through our Erie Canalway Heritage Corridor grant.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, as we're putting the sidewalk in, is there any kind of connector or anything that should be considered? I don't know the answer to that.
The large welcome map, the large welcome sign that is currently out there is also going to be replaced. And that typically would include a map of the wetlands park, and that we'd be able to feature the.
That may change if you clear out some of the scrub with that. Well, not in that area. It's not going to change the visibility.
The Rotary also.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. In addition, I'm the president-elect for Fairport Rotary, coming up in another week. Which. Yeah, I know, exactly. But as part of the process, the president-elects get to put in a grant application on looking at projects in the community and such. So the previous presidents put a grant application for accessible picnic benches and worked with the town recreation department to actually purchase them and then install them. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity, since the canal projects that we did really didn't have that piece of it as far as a picnic bench and such, and this project. So we submitted a grant application to Rotary, our district, and it was approved. So our club will match the approved amount, and we've got around a $4,500 budget to purchase the benches and put them in. I worked with Martha and with Brian, potentially having the village help us out with some gravel and to level off an area. And we're looking closer to the actual canal path area, which would attract more people to it to get and sit in that area. So we're putting one there, and then down next to the canal on the north side of the canal, in that area somewhere to be determined. Yes.
Thoughts?
I really, something that's not on the printed map that was on the pack that was sent was this, like some kind of visible cross lane for bikes and pedestrians. I really like, it says crosswalk and bike sign painted. I assume that's on the ground. I thought that was nice.
Right.
There's
Where is that, Don?
It's in the board package under the
Oh, okay.
original one. The sidewalk had a terminus, and then he put a crosswalk
Right.
across the bike lane,
Yeah.
which probably could be easily added back in here.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that as a walker in that area. I'm always worried about the bikers coming in at high speed that way. So I like that there's visibility.
Is there currently art in this area now? There's a sculpture, right?
We did a public art call, and we put in 3 signs, was it? One, there's
Four.
four,
They're
is there?
metal,
Yeah.
Four
with the
tin
rust
steel.
finish.
And you can see them where would they be in relation to this new setup, like where they currently are? Just wondering if you,
There is one that's, it's over here. That's one of our signs.
okay.
Right.
The one is deeper in along the trail,
Mhm.
and then the other 2 are at the Canalway Trail.
Okay.
Yes.
Actually, those
And
steel and
this-
the shivs would go well with those signs.
Right. And the other component of that competition was the sundial itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's nice having the public art visible from Lift Bridge to pull you,
Exactly.
that's, to pull you in there nicely.
Right, there's not much to pull you in currently.
Right.
Right.
Bob wanted to start talking about the fence along the FMC yard.
Give them a phone number to call.
Yeah.
Right. So the plan does talk about taking out sections of this guardrail, the sidewalk weaving under the guide wire. Is it GUI guide wire?
GUI.
Okay. And this is the hillside, or the opportunity to uncover the hillside.
Low maintenance. Low
Yeah.
maintenance.
Exactly.
Low maintenance.
Low maintenance.
Low maintenance.
And I saw you noted native plantings too, which probably is a great idea to.
Mhm.
Yes. We'll get onto an invasive species grant someday.
Right.
Not this one.
I was thinking about the accessibility and awareness, for the park, and thinking we should prepare some material to put, maybe added to the village's website as well as our website about the park, some of the features, why they're, the fact that the bridge rail, components are going to be in there, and the public art and what it means and those things.
Dawned on me, I was looking today, there's voter packages that are put together by the partnership that are handed to the visitors that come in. It's a whole pack of stuff in there. There really isn't anything about I mean, it's merchant kind of information,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
really lacking on historical society, public arts, and this would be a good thing to be
Yeah.
put together and be included in a packet that visitors are given.
Yeah.
No, we would create those materials to give to them. but,
Yes,
you know,
I mean, sure.
You know.
We could-
Yeah, oh, great
it's another
idea.
project.
Yes, it's all good.
But proximity wise makes perfect sense. I mean, it's really
Sure.
Yeah, they're always looking for
Yeah.
things to do.
Mhm.
Right.
get out and stretch the legs a little bit.
The wetlands is on the shot list for the photographer, so we could probably put together a nice piece.
Just a little key card.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, whatever we develop in terms of, you know, how we describe the park and all the many.
We could put
Assets.
renderings of the entrance. And, well, this is-
Yeah, right.
So I know you haven't had a lot of time to spend with the latest concept, but I think our plan would be, I'll ask you for a resolution to go ahead and make a grant application, but time-wise, we're due on July 28th. For our CFA grant, we'll be working,
Awards November,
pardon?
awards in
And
November.
they've been sliding a little closer to December, but yes.
Mhm.
And so it'd be a spring of
Right.
24 project.
And what level of plan goes in with it?
This is fine.
This is,
So, but, I
Well,
mean, we
it'll
could
be-
take this and, draft it. This was concept levels and such.
Right.
But,
I have reviewed the preliminary sketch with the village manager. As we move forward, and we'll of course work with DPW and FMC and get their input on this as well.
And they maintain it after,
correct.
Correct,
okay.
yes. Because I'm sure they'll be interested in the snow storage and the plow. Somebody
exactly.
told me the snow plow drivers have more influence over municipal projects than.
Fire department.
Or, yes.
Biggest truck ever.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right, Rob, anything?
I like it. I think it's such a neat part of our village and making it easier to access. In part of the beauty of that space is once you're in it, you feel like you are home, not
Exactly.
in a village setting. I'm wondering if there's, while we're doing this, is there a way to, we talk a lot about creating visibility and sightlines. Is there a way to sort of cordon off with maybe these evergreens, the type of plantings we would put in to separate it a little bit from the Fairport Electric sort of stockyard, if you will, of the poles and everything that's being prepped or
Right.
Kind of like screening?
Right.
exactly, whether it's like
We
Like
did
Arbor
it
from
Vitae.
this guy here?
down the street. I'm not sure how much room we have to work with. We did put some in from this view.
and that may be enough.
Back in
Just
here.
depending on how,
Yeah,
I know it's skinny once we get the along the driveway in before it bubbles out.
right.
But
Right.
just thinking about that, what we could do there potentially that might make sense to make it even more of a kind of a pleasant entry.
Right.
Um,
And we can, in our discussions with FMC and
And our
DPW.
budget should just be healthy on landscaping.
Exactly.
And when we think about how much would be coming from an IDA budget versus grants,
Mhm.
what would be with the 70,000 or 85,000 budget in mind? What would be out of pocket?
Well, 50% is the grant. It's a 50% grant from the Canal Corp.
But, so let's say we ended up with $100,000 budget.
Mhm.
Our 50,000 doesn't all necessarily gonna come from IDA. It could come from in-kind services. We
Oh.
will be able to contribute that, so it doesn't,
Mhm.
it's not necessarily guaranteed 50,000 coming out of the IDA.
Right. It is a reimbursement though, so we have to put out and then get the money back.
I'm on board. I think this is a smart investment, especially if it's maintainable.
Yeah, thanks, Martha, for walking through it.
Yeah.
Looks like it,
Thank you.
we're looking for.
Excellent. Thank you.
Tom's been working on this since 96, right? Since 96.
Yeah, maybe all before that.
Yeah, I bet, yes, I think there might be, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Oh, we need a resolution to authorize the CFA grant.
Well, And also, I'm sorry, Chair, engage the services of Labella to make the grant application. Their fee would be $2,500. We worked with them previously on our grants.
We don't have their proposal.
No, because this literally, it's been very quick to come forward, and our grant application is due July 28th. So I don't have a proposal. I confirmed with Ed Flynn of Labella, who did the work before, would be $2,500. So I asked the board to authorize me to enter into a contract up
So
to
two separate resolutions.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Motion regarding engaging Labella.
I'll second that.
Any discussion or more discussion regarding that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we need another motion for a resolution to proceed and go for the CFA grant regarding to the Thomas Creek Wetlands Entrance Project.
I'll make that motion.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is BME. Peter was here last month and we talked about what we might be looking for at the parking. He's done some work. He's going to talk to us about it.
Yeah, so,
The mic's not on.
Oh,
It's just-
geez.
It's my micro, it's here that I have.
oh, okay. All right. So when we were here, last month, we initiated this and the discussions on the expansion of the North Main parking lot. And kind of our charge walking out of there was just, let's try to get a handle on the scope of the work that could be done out there, because the magnitude can be something as simple of just pave and stripe what you already have to, okay, is there, with the spending of some additional monies, what's the bang for the buck we can get? And so what we were asked to do, and this is what we did do, is we looked at a few options just to get a sense of the lay of the land. What can the land really yield for us? Kind of almost how aggressive do you want to get out there? And I think one of the things that we had heard last month was while there is the need to expand that parking, we didn't want to necessarily have parking be the driving force of what ultimately happens with that area east of the existing parking lot. There was a plan done back in 2015, 2016 that obviously looked at some type of a linear park along Thomas Creek itself. And so kind of was like, well, let's not box ourselves in a corner and preclude us from ever becoming a reality. So, what we did, and discussing this with Martha over the past month, is we gave you 5 options, and more or less just to give you a sense of how things work out there. I mean, we could have done 10, we could have done 15. But the point is with these 5 is really, I just want to be able to discuss principles with you so you get a sense of what this means. And then what we did, were you able to share with them the numbers?
Yes. They
Okay.
have a copy of that.
And then the other thing we did is just to give us a magnitude, we prepared for those options a rough idea of how much pavement are we talking about and what would be the cost, and kind of broke it down to a cost per space analysis. Just, you look at these and go, well, is this one better than that one? Is it worth it to do this to add 5 more spaces? Again, context, because really what our goal is, and it was part of our charge from last month also, was like, let's get our scope defined, then we'll make our good step forward of designing it. So with that, I just want to walk you through just really what the principles are. Obviously, the first option we looked at just said, okay, what if we, for lack of a better term, do nothing? Just take the milled area that's there, the area with the millings, pave it, finish it off, and and be done with it. And what we showed is it's obviously the least expensive of the measures, but it also generates the least number of spaces. It gets you about 55 to 60 parking spaces in there. Obviously, great. It's a good value, and you're no worse off for doing it. Again, part of, I know with what your next item is, we're trying to get a handle on really what is the right number, and I don't think anybody knows that now, and I don't know if we'd ever will know that number. Just as life goes on, but it's really kind of, we have this opportunity here, we have this property available. What's our best way to use it? So we just did that for more of the simplistic, straightforward of if somebody say, what if we did nothing? What could we get?
So with that one, can I assume that we would actually not have a net gain of 57 spaces?
That's like currently what people are parking.
Oh, correct. That's
a
a great point.
We would make them park more efficiently, so there would be.
Yeah, maybe you pick up 5, 8, but you're right. I mean, as we all know, that area has become, it's used.
Yeah.
The only thing what you'd be doing is efficiently, and you'd actually spend a lot of money. I should say a lot of money as it relates, whether it's lighting and sidewalks, to formalize it, maybe is the best way to put it.
Which, by the way, as we get to these other ones, is lighting included?
No, so that is the one thing I did note on here. I just gave you the pavement cost only because that's really the variable. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to choose sidewalk, regardless of what alternate, the sidewalk length is the sidewalk length, the number of light poles is the light pole length, drainage grading. We're estimating that's probably another $75,000 worth of work there. Okay, but it was the pavement is the variable. So, but that's a good point, Kevin, what you bring up about net gain. Maybe it's a handful at best. So what we looked at really is, okay, really the way to get a net gain is to expand this parking lot to the south, to add another row of parking to the south of the existing pavement. And those were the alternates we looked at. And really what it came down to, part of what we considered, and it's the biggest contributor to why this cost differential is what it is, that the cost being at a higher rate than if we just pave what's there, is because we single load the parking. We're putting a drive aisle in and getting one additional row of parking. We didn't double load it because it really encroaches into that wetland area, or the Thomas Creek corridor area. And there's a couple things about that maybe aren't highly recommended. A is we're definitely now getting into the floodway area of the creek, such that any disturbance we do in there, we have to compensate for. And that in and of itself adds another layer of design and construction costs. It really pushes the parking lot pretty close to the creek itself. So you'd forego any type of a linear park, except for maybe a sidewalk. Those were the two main challenges. And because of the way the grade drops off, there definitely would be a lot more earthwork construction. So we can look at that alternate, but we felt, based on our discussion last month, because we had the one sketch that the courtesy of Donahoe management had prepared, we all, I think, felt that was a little aggressive. It was really taking that area and it was going to change it permanently, versus a balance of what you do have is a nice natural feature of the creek through there. And we've talked about how that area can link with, areas to the west and whatnot. So we looked at single loaded areas. As I mentioned, they're not the most cost efficient. So what's the best way to make it happen? And it really comes down to the traffic flow patterns. And it's how much pavement you want to provide, whether it's a one-way traffic loop pattern through there, or being able to have the drive lanes be two-way each and every way. It's just more pavement. And that's really what you see the difference here between these options. The good part is I should say, all of these options provide anywhere from 75 to 95 spaces. So you are picking up anywhere from 25 to another 40 net spaces. That we feel is the balance we've heard that you'd like to see. So that's really is what we're looking at as a net gain out there, while maintaining the the corridor itself.
Okay, so you are on these still providing access for this being a right of way that DPW.
Yes. Oh, that's a
south.
good point.
There-
Thank you.
there's
Is
a
both
connector there.
all of these options allow for the road continued DPW access to their area. And it also allows in the future, if there was ever to be a connection to Water Street, if that ever was deemed to be possible, we're not preventing that from happening in the future either. So we kind of worked to the east. We kind of worked within the existing footprint area, the limit of what's being parked now. So really what we're picking up is what that expansion is to the south by adding another row of parking. And it really comes down to what do we believe is the best traffic flow pattern there. Discussions we've had with Martha and internally on that, everything we do, people don't necessarily follow all of the signage or whatever. We all know that. So you kind of have to prepare it from a standpoint of going, well, we would really like a one-way flow pattern and allow us to be efficient and whatnot. You got to plan for the fact that somebody's going to back out and go the wrong way. And are they going to be able to pass? And that's kind of how we approach this design a little bit, is to acknowledge that. The other thing we did that I kind of liked is we took that sidewalk and we actually extended it, I'm going to say down the middle to split the parking rows, because that'll be functional in a couple of ways. First of all, we gave you the option that showed, well, what happens if you just put it all the way at the south end of wherever you expand? That's fine, but I think anybody that parks where they're parking now that sidewalk will be very underutilized. That's about $15,000 worth of sidewalk that just wouldn't be used. They'll walk down the aisle. The other thing we like about splitting it is it really then provides an area. That's where we'll put the lighting, because I think we did talk about this being a public parking lot. It is somewhat remote in regards. There's no other activity back there. There's no business back there or anything. I think lighting is very important from a safety standpoint. And so if we put that walk there, we'd be able to light. That's where we put the light poles too. That way it'd light the walkway, light all the parking base. And I do think, and then from a pedestrian safety standpoint, it gets the pedestrians really on a convenient pathway to head them to Main Street. So I think that's a very important component of this.
Peter, could I ask, would that sidewalk be at grade or would it be curbed? Because I think our sidewalk out there is at grade, which is not a bad thing, right? That's less expensive.
My only concern is I would not likely recommend it being at grade, because with cars parking against each other, especially if you get snow cover or anything, next thing you know, you could lose that walkway if people pull too far ahead or whatever. The curbing becomes the bumper stops too.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Does option 3, where you have the diagonal,
Yep.
does that pull you closer in is that the purpose of the diagonal spots?
So what it does, it was just to minimize the pavement footprint,
Okay.
And it definitely would lend itself to a one-way travel pattern,
Right.
because then you back up, it definitely points you the way. But as somebody that's been a user of the Box Factory parking lot for 33 years, doesn't matter. Trust me, it doesn't matter.
That's one way.
No matter how you point people, they'll still find a way to go the other way. So, but that was the main reason for that, was to really, if we wanted to utilize the one-way traffic pattern, the angle parking definitely gets them going in the right direction. But the challenge we have with that option is if you come down the northern route, the current double loaded route, and that's full, and you loop
Oh.
around, now you're heading the wrong way.
Yeah.
If you feel that's the way to get out.
Turn around.
Yeah, versus
You have to
turning
back
around.
into the- Oh.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So,
we gotta do the double.
yeah, I think we have to allow for two-way traffic down there. And that's the challenge, is that, it's not the most efficient use of the dollars for what you get.
So that looks like option 2 then,
Right. Either that, or I do believe option 5 is very viable also, from the standpoint, because I don't think you need a full 24-foot wide two-way traffic pattern, especially for this is somewhat of a low volume use. I think you can go to a narrower pavement section through there that would allow the two cars to pass too.
And does 5, that picks up some additional spaces closer to.
Right, because
Common?
the difference between 5 and 4 is we move the access point to that new southern row of parking to the west. We'd actually remove 3. We're gonna have to do drainage improvements anyways because of adding the new impervious area. So we're gonna take that existing stormwater facilities there, reconfigure it, and basically get some space, some additional spaces there. That gives us our highest yield. Option 5 does, because of that. We're using more of that land that's along the existing parking areas.
Mr. Garth, this is helpful. One thing that I keep on coming back to too is thinking about that linear park.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over there earlier today, and there's 2 questions. One, right now in that parking lot, in the milled section,
Mm-hmm.
there are what look like gears related to the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, if you can picture where they are currently sitting,
Mm-hmm.
where would they be sitting on any of these maps right now? Are they at the very end?
They're very close to that.
Okay.
Yes, Rob. Yes,
Okay.
they are.
So that helps kind of that direction, just
Yep.
trying to get a feel for what all of these options, how they would sit, where they would sit. But with the linear park in mind too, it was hard for me to think about and visualize much green space at all
Mm-hmm.
if we are extending, like we're talking about, south for this extra row of parking. Do you have a sense, if we go with option 5, for example,
Mm-hmm.
how much space would there be? It looks like it increases the further east we come.
Correct, it does, because the creek
Kind of
bends back to the south.
Is it a realistic thought that we would have space for that park, more than just a sidewalk, but sidewalk plus sitting area?
Yes.
Sidewalk plus space where to throw a blanket on the ground, whatever it might be.
Sure. That is something we kept in the back of our mind in doing this, because I'll be honest with you, if we were doing any of these options where we just had the single loaded, if it was going to preclude the park for whatever reason, we said, well, we might as well just add the parking now to it. Because if you've given up the linear park, then, what can we do from a parking standpoint? But we looked at that because we have the original plan. So we have a sense of scale of that and how it works. Now, is it the same scale as 2015? No, it's not. But is it able to create a lot of the same elements? Yes, it is. Maybe what we can do, because it's simple enough for us to do, we can go out there and we can put a couple of stakes with flags in the ground of where the limits would be.
Okay.
And basically I'll send Martha a note when it's done. And then that way you guys can go out and just take a look and go, okay, this shows us where we would expand to. There's the creek. are we comfortable with what this separation is?
In option 5, there's the timber fence.
Right.
Because we have looks like we're
The main,
grading it, there's a little drop.
we just showed that we would actually recommend that for all of them, and I give credit to Martha for this. The main reason for the timber fence is because of our experiences across the street, people would park parallel.
Oh, okay.
You know, they will. Because I originally, we actually showed a row of parallel parking along there going, kind of, our thought was, we know they're going to do it, we might as well create them. But then again, we're starting to push into that area.
So that's not because there's such a great drop.
It
really
was just
to control
hopefully
parking.
to discourage people from parking along there.
What is it? We're on a slope a little bit here for that linear park.
Mhm.
It's relatively flat? It looks like it's not, like I can't read they're really little on my thing on the,
Mhm.
like if there was a linear park there, is
See,
it usable space?
it is. There's
Okay.
pockets,
Okay.
and that's been the whole principle of the linear park is, and that's why it's called a linear park. Is the trail is the main feature, but you create pockets for little, whether it's like as Rob said, an area where somebody can sit, or whether it's benches, whether
It's
there
not
was
gonna be 60-foot wide street.
no, exactly.
okay.
It's
Which
gonna
is good, nature doesn't work like that.
that's right, and it's exactly it's gonna work with the terrain.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
If you live on High Street, and this is, well in the back of your backyard, how
Yep.
much are they gonna see in terms of lights or
Um,
disruption on a regular Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night?
So, I mean, the one part is the extent of the parking isn't any more than it is today as to how far it would go down High Street per se, how far we're not proposing to go any further. The lighting that would be done would be the LED lighting. They'd probably be on maybe 16-foot, 18-foot poles. And given the elevation difference, they're actually definitely second floor, they'll be above the lights. And with the LEDs, you don't get the upglow or anything. So I don't think it'd be any more intrusive than what there is today. And if anything, I would probably argue it's probably even a little bit safer if you're a resident, because now that area is lighted, for anything that could happen back there.
When you talk on the map about stormwater management areas, it would be similar to what we're looking
Yeah.
at today, just depressions,
Yeah,
swales.
yeah. It would be the stormwater, very similar to what's there. They'll just be reconfigured and somewhat. We would have to put a new one at the east end anyways by changing that land cover. So we feel comfortable with that, and they could be incorporated in the future with any of the linear park because they can be designed in that format.
Just out of curiosity, what's the current going cost for a parking garage per space?
Well, I was always told a parking garage space is 10 times a surface space. So if we're estimating a surface space is around $2,000 a space, a parking garage space would be 20,000. And I imagine that 10-to-1 ratio is probably outdated itself. And then you have the O&M, which is a higher rate than plowing and whatnot. Yep, exactly.
They just hear people.
Yep.
Well, why don't they?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, define they, please. Yes.
No, just throw it in.
Mhm. So, I mean, so really what I want you to think about is we've kind of given you an idea of how this could look. And the reality of it is, like, as I said, we can be as aggressive as you want to be. This was just to give you an idea of what it would look like and what is the yield at the end of the day. For instance, do you really want to spend $250,000 when it's all said and done to pick up 20 parking spaces? Is that worth it? Except for the fact if you can say you did something, that's exactly the point versus what is the true value, or, you know, like you said at the beginning, the bang for your buck, so to speak.
Well,
But
I'm
is
glad
there-
you're.
I was just gonna say, you know, is there really ever gonna be a fix? I mean, like,
Right.
We can't even
There is
possibly
not
fix
a,
this
so I think
situation.
we determined there is not a solution
Right.
to that issue. There's gonna be multiple things that
Right.
can be done to improve the situation. And part of it is education, but.
Right.
That's the toughest part.
You know, and one thing, you know, like I said, that would bring this cost down too, and I guess I need to put it out there. You can even add the additional parking and just pave everything, not do the walks and the lighting and whatnot.
Lighting's critical.
But exactly, I mean, I think, for lack of a better way, Fairport's better than that, I guess is my point.
Well, I'm really glad that you did take into account of preserving the linear park, because that is important to us. And like you said,
Yep.
it may be different than what we talked about in 2015. The dog park.
It's shrinking.
Right.
It's shrinking.
It's shrinking, yes.
And, but I think it is important to us. I think we've always said it's a great opportunity. That's a neat little creek, you know,
Mhm.
back through there. And if we can do something to clean it up and make it attractive for more green space on the north side, it's great.
Yeah.
So that is important to us, and we don't want to box ourselves out.
Right. And that's what we've tried to do, is give you an idea of what gives you the,
Yep.
try to address a current problem or contribute to addressing a current problem. Because as you said, it's not a single, this is not the single solution, but it is, I think what you're trying to do is optimize the opportunity this specific piece of property gives you, while not foregoing what your ultimate goal for the entire piece of property is.
So what do we do next? This is,
I think we have to give Peter direction about how.
do we have to select it? I'm not.
No, I think what I would, yeah, and I'm not asking for that. I've heard a good amount here this evening to get a sense of what your desires are, and the fact of the
Yeah,
linear
you
park.
offered to Rob about throwing some stakes in it.
Yeah, and I think we'll
Give
do
us a
that,
Visual, I think that would be great.
and it won't take us much to morph. I think what I would like to give you for your meeting on July 17th,
24th, actually.
24th,
Let me
okay.
move that one.
All right. What I'd like to do there is I can do morph the two plans. I'm going to say morph the 2023 plan with the 2015 plan to give you a sense what that linear park can look like. Because I think that's important for you to make the decision of how far south you go, so to speak. I think without seeing that, I don't think you can make what option
Maybe
you
we
want.
could think about doing a walkabout with them, you know,
Mhm.
before the meeting starts or something.
Yeah, that's a
like
good
that,
point
or
too.
something. Just
Yep.
Get a real visual for us, which is more valuable than us.
Yeah.
Just trying to picture where those flags were.
That's right. So I think that's what we should do. Okay.
Any other thoughts for direction that they should be focused on? I think he captured pretty well our last meeting.
Just thinking about our property line.
Mhm.
Water Street comes up relatively quickly, right?
Mhm.
But are we, with option 5, are we maximizing east?
I'm gonna say yes to make it functional. Now, and what I mean by that though, could we expand it to the east a little bit more, maybe pick up another couple of spaces? Sure, and then if the connection to Water Street were ever to happen, you'd remove them. Yeah, you could do it. That can happen. I mean, that's a simple enough sketch for us to look at though, Rob, to go, you know, if we want to go as far east as we can and just know someday they may have a few have to get removed if we connect to Water Street. Here's the yield, because I think at the end of the day, this is all about, like I said, spending the money wisely. What's the return you're getting today on that? Okay, so
Anything else, anyone? Board? All good?
I'm gonna stick around
Yeah,
too.
We're on the right track.
All right.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
See you.
Bye, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. You don't need it. Okay, what's up next? David gonna talk to us?
Yes.
So David, after our meeting last month, we've talked quite a bit, and he's separated the two proposals so that we can look at them, because they're two different issues, really.
Yeah.
With regard to what is happening at the curb, which is the mobility study, transportation impact report, and then the parking study, those two separate things. So we can look at them independently now a little bit better. Because my concern that I've expressed before is if we're bringing 60 plus additional spaces, that's 120 people that are now going to be crossing Main Street. And are there things that we can do to ensure a safe crossing? So if you could walk us through
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. So good evening, everyone. David Cruzy again. Like Peter mentioned, came away with a lot of good discussion from the last meeting. Refine what you're looking for to try and target a proposal that's well scoped and meeting OSED's needs for this project, and understanding the balance between OSED and the village. That there are current issues occurring village related, and then there's current issues related to perhaps what OSED may be able to address. So we're dancing a delicate dance right now, but I think what we've done here and working with Martha over the last month has been very helpful, is to, as she mentioned, separate out these two proposals, understanding that what's going on now with the parking plan that you just saw. Yes, it is going to add more traffic and more foot traffic, especially on the eastern side of Main Street. And how are they going to get to, really what's the biggest draw that there is over there is on the west side of Main Street. So this mobility study that we're calling it, it's sort of like a transportation impact report. I'm sort of thinking of this parking lot expansion as a development that's occurring, and there's traffic that's going to be going in there, and we're going to have to address how does the traffic get accommodated at the street. And that's Peter's looking at everything internal, and this is what we do. We look at everything on the road. And so coming from this, we've identified some intersections to take a look at during notable peak times that's relative to traffic out there. Your Friday afternoon, that early evening, 4 to 6, and then your Saturday afternoon again, about that 4 to 6. I will preface that to say that that's not a typical time to count. If you're going to do a study and it's going to be reviewed by DOT and they're going to make determinations on mitigation, 4 to 6 on a Saturday is really not what they're looking for. However, this is more indicative of what's actually occurring out there and what are the large generators on the side streets, and that's usually about that time of day. Now, it's not to say that we can't do something at a more typical Saturday time, which is your 11 to 1 or 12 to 2. You can probably make assumptions based on that, but really, if we're talking about what's our greatest opportunity for foot traffic, which is really what we're trying to address is the most vulnerable user out there now. It's going to be the pedestrians crossing over to get to their destinations. So it'll be looking at that. It'll be looking at how are people actually crossing there today. Identify where those crossings are occurring and how many are there occurring, because that's going to be important data for DOT. That if we come away with this to say, you need to consider a new crosswalk, perhaps at the southerlymost intersection to the parking lots, right near the old Companion building. Well, they're going to want to know, all right, well, exactly how many pedestrians are crossing out there today? How many could you assume? And then what kind of enhancements might be necessary if you do want to put in a new crosswalk? You might have to do something like a curb extension or enhanced signage, maybe the rapid flashing beacons that you see in more and more locations around here. The other thing, though, that was a little bit different in this one is that the stakeholder and public engagement plan that we identified in here, really what this is speaking to is developing, and it's completely at the whim of the board to identify if that's really wanted to be included. However, to look at it from like a parking or from a community planning standpoint, that would be one of the key pieces to know is does the public agree or disagree with what perhaps may be changed out there? It's not necessary. I mean, the public doesn't always, they're not necessarily involved with any decision making when it comes to a land development, a private development. You know, of course, they'll have their say at a board meeting, but you know, in this regard, this is more of an actual here. Let's sit down. We'll actually have a survey for people to take that are, you know, for visitors that are traveling to these businesses. How are they experiencing Main Street in that area, and what do they want to share that we could glean that could be, you know, perhaps enhance this. So that could be an important piece to add in here. Not an elaborate undertaking, but certainly something that, you know, it could have some really interesting feedback generated. And then, of course, just getting into our analysis, looking at the various options, looking at it from a traffic standpoint, but really mostly looking at it from a pedestrian standpoint, really trying to treat the vulnerable users out there as the highest priority. How do we better suit them and better address them in a safe fashion? And of course, meet with you folks to go over the report periodically and make sure that we're updating it and you know, capturing all the feedback that you wish to make on it, so that we're, you know, we could have really a plan that's and I'm calling it a plan, is your plan. It's something that, yes, we've addressed technically, and you know, we've authored it, but you know, a lot of the meat and potatoes is coming from you and the input that you might have for us to really hone in on. So that's the mobility study, and that I think is, I wouldn't say one priority over another, but I think that's certainly something that as we experience more and more nicer days, we're going to start seeing more and more people getting out on foot. And then, of course, there's the parking study, and that's more of the documenting the parking, what's going on there today, and how can we address it in the future, and what kind of strategies could we look at. Again, that's you know, as we know, that's a bit of a delicate endeavor to get into as well. I mean, you're dealing with businesses that are already established. You're not looking to you know, try to ruffle any feathers, but there's certainly some opportunities that I think could work, and some buy-in as long as the business owners are you know, well educated. You mentioned education in the last presentation. I think education is number one when it comes to any of these types of projects. So just for clarity purposes, we separated them both out. I'd be happy to take any questions on any details out of it. Tried to certainly come down on terms of fee from the last time around, knowing what we know now, what I know now, what you're looking for, and then again separating it so that we can address one project that might be more of a priority than the other.
I have a question, but it's actually I'm asking Peter. The village is doing a streetscape project that I think you guys are doing.
For
The village's streetscape.
Main Street?
Yeah.
No, Clark Patterson's doing that. We're just doing the survey.
Oh. And well, maybe you know, David, is the question was going to be, what are they, if anything, doing for public engagement, and what kind of studies might they be doing now? Their work is going to be outside the curb lines, but still, it's going to, there is some on-street parking on Main Street, and are you familiar with anything that they're doing there?
I'm familiar with the BME's plan from
20.
Yeah, that's
you know, that we've referenced.
I think it's changed.
Right.
Oh, I'm sure it has, but I'm familiar with, you know, what's gone in on that. But from CPL standpoint, I would love to get more information. I mean,
Yeah,
that kind of information is what
I'm
we.
just wondering about any kind of redundancy,
Right.
or building off of, you know, one to the other, you know, that's usable. Just
Yeah,
curious.
maybe to reach out to Brian White,
Yeah, we can do that.
what their schedule is. I just know we're just doing.
Well, I know that they're in it for 25 construction.
Yeah.
Is the plan.
So yeah, I mean, this is definitely the time, and we've I'll say SRF, who I was formerly with, we've had very great luck over the last 2 decades of being able to recommend or undergo projects, and then the recommendations are folded right into a routine maintenance project by DOT, or in this case, the streetscape project that's coming down in a couple of years. Now, there certainly can be some redundancies, so that I think, you know, if Brian's the person to reach out to, whoever, you know, I need to know to make sure that I get the proper information. The way that I would approach it, if I was doing this as like a planning type study, would be a type of project that I'm also coordinating with another firm on, but this is part of my research of recent plans and studies to go into.
Sure.
Yep.
Who does, if there are improvements like a crosswalk change, is it New York State DOT? It's probably a dumb question. Like, who does the work on the street?
Yeah, it would have to go through their review. I mean, there is a jurisdictional quirk in the village, and I can't recall exactly where it changes hands, but DOT has oversight over. This is, you know, New York State Route
But
250.
most of those kind of improvements that are done by the village.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, the village will do
Up
it?
Even
to
though it
High
is a state
Street
highway.
is
Oh, okay.
still the village.
Where'd you
But-
say, up to High Street?
I know up to High Street is still the village.
Okay.
They do the work, but
But-
David's right, DOT reviews the work.
Yeah. And so something like that, if a new crosswalk were to go in, you know, of course they're going to want to make sure that it's safe, you know, by their standards, because, you know, anything that goes in on Main Street will certainly be designed to state spec because it is a state road.
And I do know from talking to Brian White 2 weeks ago, they have started meeting with New York State DOT. They've had at least 2 meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Regarding-
Streetscape?
regarding Main Street.
Okay.
So I do know
All right.
that.
Great.
They're also going to, DOT is also going to be digging up Main Street next year to replace the culvert where Thomas Creek goes under.
Right.
That's the 24.
That's in 24.
Is that what, that's why all the trucks were there
I don't know.
last week? They weren't.
Yeah, I think they were doing some design inspection
Yeah,
stuff.
they were in the old donut shop, Mac's driveway. Walking back and forth.
I mean, the more we're talking here, it certainly feels like it's more of a representative role that, if anything, out of my office for us to take, because it sounds like y'all got everything buttoned up with DOT, and, you know, this is going to be maybe a little bit redundant with you. So I don't want to, you know, have you spend money that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, because our kind of charge to ourselves going into this is to, what can we do to improve the parking situation at the campus? That's kind of what we want, and not resolve. What can we do to improve it? And so I think that's kind of what we talked about the last time. Because yeah, and it's difficult. You mentioned it, is drawing that line between, you know, a study that really is warranted for the village in its entirety, or at least the commercial business or Main Street, you know, in its entirety, versus what our Northwest Quadrant plan that we had done previously, and what we've been, you know, we want to improve the Northwest Quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
And even more narrowly, it's the cannery. So.
I also, you know, talking about mobility though, you know, the more we put people parking across the street, the more bodies are going to be crossing that street, cars going in and, you know, and turning right into the cannery, finding no parking, trying to jump, you know, all that movement. So I mean, safety, yes, helping improve parking, but like safety,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Now that could be it. I mean, I'll just jump in real quick.
We can't wait
and let.
until 2025.
That's what I was gonna go with, is the timing of all of this. You know, those improvements, streetscape improvements aren't coming till 2025.
Well, the improvements aren't going to do anything for the situation, but the design is, and the design is going on currently. know, they're in design and in reporting stages now. So that information, there may be stuff that can be shared now. It's not like we're waiting until 2025 to, you know, do a physical improvement.
Yeah, and see, you know, I'm even wondering at this point, it could be making a formal letter to DOT, hey, this is what we are concerned about at this area, and can you please study it? And if they're willing to study it, they'll certainly go out and do their study to make sure that they need to. But if it's
Brian White before we do anything like that. I always like to.
What is the idea potentially that we, this would be duplicative, the mobility study would be duplicative? I was under the impression that when we split this, if nothing else, if we're gonna put in new parking, then the parking study almost becomes a moot, because we're doing what we can to control that
We
situation.
know what the parking.
But the mobility,
situation-
right, we know what that study's gonna spit out. But with mobility, if that's a prereq for getting DOT and putting a safer passage across the street, then that to me is money well spent. But if what, I don't know what your last point was, David, or just if you can clarify for me, are you suggesting that maybe part of this bigger plan, we appeal to DOT and they would do a mobility study themselves for a crosswalk in that space?
you would have to probably go through, like Kevin said, probably go through Brian, so that it could be a village ask to say, hey, we're experiencing, or we may have some safety issues out here. They're already in discussions right now. And so if there is something that they need to be aware of and they need to identify and or study, collect data on, DOT can certainly go out. I mean, anything that we've done in the past, or if we do a speed study or if we do a pedestrian study, if DOT really wants to, they can go out there and do their own study and basically, you know, double check a consultant's work. I mean, it happens very frequently.
Martha, have you had conversations with Brian on this one, or was it?
I told him that we were talking with David about our concerns about moving people
So he's
safely
aware
across Main Street.
Okay, so at least he's aware of our concern.
So I mean, I would say at this stage, it would be very helpful to know who at DOT has been engaged at this point with, especially in this area. If this is an area that they should be notified as a higher priority for any of their review with CPL. And then, you know, after that, it could be, you could either have us review any, you know, basically be a reviewing consultant on the matter. Because it sounds like there is some.
Let's deal with what's in front of us for the moment. And, what we should retain Paso Road for. We have the two proposals. The point Rob made, I agree with. I think that makes sense. We know what the parking issue is. The mobility, though, is something we need to be concerned about. And Martha, your thoughts on this? You've worked closely on this.
One of the things I talked about with David is that we're in an odd place as OSET, but one of the things we're trying to be is innovative and collaborative and, you know, engaging with our community. So I think this mobility study, if we engaged for a mobility study, that document just doesn't become moot at the end of the day. It's of value to someone, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it would. I can share firsthand. Working in Pittsford, we did a study that was on the heels of their village's active transportation plan, but we also prepared. Out of that came 4 areas that the mayor at the time got funding for to study those 4 particular high priority areas, and then worked with DOT to go back and forth with some concepts and schematics. And then ultimately nowadays, you can, when you're traveling out there, the new crosswalks that you see in front of the library, the median refuge that you see in front of Del Monte, and then the new crosswalk just south of Four Corners there, that came out of that pedestrian safety study. So we did our due diligence of looking at each of those locations, did pedestrian counts at the trail to see if that needed enhancement, which they ended up throwing up a rapid flashing beacon. So it was a much more scaled back. It wasn't traffic associated. It was really just pedestrian oriented. And
So yeah, it does have value, for multiple users. I mean, our boards, the volunteer boards maybe, but using that information.
And that piece could be incorporated into the village's cap study, that when that's done. And,
Are they doing?
well, at some point, I assume they would update it. It's, while indeed we have the streetscape and CPL working on it, it doesn't negate the value of what the data that we would collect that would be of use to them, to the village, to.
No, but it's just gonna define our limits of what we're.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's really my concern, is that we're really clear on, like, as I understand it, our purpose of wanting to study information so we can make improvements if we have that possibility in that area, is to protect the investments that we've made in businesses up there in our role as the IDA. Yes, I will not name the neighboring village, town that I don't go to anymore because I do not feel safe as parking or as a pedestrian in accessing their businesses. And I would hate to know that people have the same feeling towards Fairport at some point. Like, I'm not going there, it's too much of a bother. Or I heard somebody was, hit by a car trying to cross the street. I'm not going to go to that business. So I think there's overlapping interest of keeping our residents safe. Our interest is as it relates to access to businesses. I would hope the villages would be as it relates to the safety and well-being of our residents and visitors. So, and I don't know if there's a clear line, because I would be concerned that if there was an accident, that it would affect other businesses. And how can you say it affects businesses but not the residents, right? But I just want to make sure that at least there's a shared objective or a shared interest in that mobility study with the village.
If we do this study, the information that comes from it, say we want to get that area made safer before the streetscape, is that what we're thinking, that time frame wise?
Yeah.
We would want to do something before they're ready. The outcome of the study, in order to then get it done, we still have to go through Brian and DO, same path forward, no matter what, to get it done, correct?
yeah, and you would run in.
Say go through it, I'd go through
Well,
Brian.
who, do we have the authority to do that work on Main Street to put the crosswalk in?
Oh,
Or
no.
The village is
So
going
the-
to want to, or the DOT is gonna want to deal with the village.
the municipality, right?
Yeah.
They're not gonna
Yeah.
talk to us.
Yes.
So we're going through them regardless to do the.
Because even if
to
it's
make
our
them.
Yes.
Yeah, and you run into a timing quandary right now, is that if you wanted to do something sooner than later, if it's hardscape oriented, then it's going to have to be ripped out and
Well, that's my
redone.
question is if they're gonna go through and dig it up.
Yeah,
anyway.
it's going to be
Would
dug up.
signaling, I mean, if the end result was in the interim, these are the things you should do at the existing crosswalk, would those be,
Right.
So at the
we wouldn't be redesigning it, we just, not hardscape, but are there
Yeah.
things that we could do to improve the existing? Is it changing the timing on this traffic lights?
It could
Something
be,
as
it could
simple
be
as
something
that.
as simple as that,
Right.
definitely. It could be looking at the timing there. What are the pedestrian crossing times right now? Can that signal be upgraded
Mm.
now? If there isn't a feature out there that it should have, whether it's better countdown signals, maybe another set of crosswalks on the north side of the road, if that makes sense there. Or it's something, could they entertain, and some DOTs shy away from this, but could they entertain doing a signal timing phase if it were able to be implemented, where it stops all traffic, or at least on that approach, it's called the leading pedestrian interval. It gives the pedestrian about 3 seconds or so to get out into the crosswalk before that green signal for the concurrent movement. So let's say you're crossing from the west or the east side to the west side going to Village Inn. So that approach there, that high street traffic, gets the green. So in this case, the pedestrian signal would indicate the green. And then 3 seconds later, then the motorist would now get their green indication. But at that point, pedestrians are already out into the crosswalk, and they're in a much more visible position.
So that's a result that could come out of this, that
We could just wait on the hardscape and then do all the other things to make it safe.
Yeah,
With results.
there's opportunities there. Could it be something, as simple as doing some signage closer to the parking lot saying, cross at signal? I mean, that kind of stuff is it doesn't need to be a big study, but it could be just something like as simple as that to try and get people to stop doing the jaywalking if there's going to be an issue there especially with the train backups, bridge being up. We know how the queues can get through there.
and if we could figure out a way for people to stop blocking the box when the train is coming through or the bridge is up,
yeah.
So I'm thinking through this discussion, there's our low.
There could be low-hanging fruit, I would say.
Yeah, and if we have the data, then we can go forward and
So
get that implemented perhaps.
So are we of the mindset that we are willing to and want to enter into a mobility study?
I have
With that
one more
proposal?
question.
Sure.
When is that, that big building gonna be renovated and come online?
75.
North Main.
Yeah, 75.
Parts of it's late
Preservation,
summer.
yeah.
The brewery is supposed to be this
This
summer.
late summer, okay. So it's 2 months, yeah, okay. I would hate to do a study like right before and then it suddenly becomes obsolete because we moved into even a bigger problem because of the traffic of that building.
But I think the study would be based on anticipating what we're doing on the east side. And if more businesses came on the west side, we're not going to be adding it. We have a finite number and you operate from that.
You already have the finite number of parking on the west side,
Right.
so yeah, you're assuming
You could draw more, what happens
the
on the
future
west
condition
side.
is whatever's going on the east side. What capacity improvements you're
Right.
making there.
Based on what we're at.
Right,
Yeah.
there's a finite number of spaces.
Correct. So the other alternative I'll throw out here is from more of I guess I would say a representative consultant on that, in that we could review what's going on, try to become attached to what's going on between CPL, the village, and NISDOT, and be more of a representative, a third-party reviewer of what's going on there. Also share the opinions and the viewpoints of the board here, what the desires are for safety improvements. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that there's going to have to be a lot of sharing that goes on and some joint meetings and the like. But again, I'm going to go back to, for our purposes, are we as a board is this what we would like to do as into the mobility study with Passero? And for right now, say we really don't need parking data, a parking study, because again, finite number of spaces. It is what it is. And if there's spaces available at 2 o'clock is in the afternoon, that's not going to really change anything. Right?
The only other thought was potentially, I remember when we initially started having a conversation about doing this, part of it was this was going to be kind of the sheet music for a factual conversation to try to get reasonable minds to come together.
Well, yeah,
Is that?
I think the factual is going to turn to anecdotal when you talk to any of the stakeholders. It's just going to be, I know what I see with my eyes. I don't need,
That was the only potential value. I mean, if we're going to move forward on the other side of the road with expanding parking, regardless of what a study says, that's one factor towards probably we can reallocate those funds towards that part.
That's what I'm thinking.
But before we stamp it, just thinking about what resources would be helpful to try to get a meeting of the minds and folks to be more agreeable and collaborative. I don't know that the answer is that parking study would help that. It's just a question kind of with that in mind too.
Well, I think about things as simple as, the previous study examined a larger area. and would I have identified Parse Avenue? So that our consultant's recommendations could have supported the village in their attempts to look at Parse, putting parking on it, and also saying to the neighbors, we've studied this. This is what's happened, or what's, if with the parking on Parse, this is what you can expect. It's again trying to support the village, the residents, the businesses, in a, OSED is a supporting organization to the village. So we miss out that type of thing, being able to advocate on behalf of the businesses primarily to add that parking. But I mean, this type of, if can go forward with the mobility study, that.
We can add on parking at any time.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get off this and get moving in.
I think we should move forward with the mobility study
Thanks.
for all the reasons Martha mentioned. It gives us, I'm not even gonna go through it.
Was that a motion?
That is a motion to spend the numbers. I think I saw something in the.
Thank you.
8,500.
Yeah, 80, less than 9,000.
Okay.
Second that motion.
Any further discussion? There will be further discussion and more discussion.
Lots.
Yeah.
For us right now. Anyone? You good?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we have that. So
Okay.
Martha will be coordinating with you on next steps.
Okay.
A lot of good stuff came out of this conversation.
Certainly did.
Thank you.
Makes us think and stuff. So
Okay. All right.
Great.
Let us know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, too, Peter.
very much.
Good night, guys.
Good night. Thank you all. Great discussion. Never ending.
We can talk about this all day.
But we're not going to.
but we're not going to. We're on
We have
clock.
a 6:45, remember?
Well, hurry up.
All right, okay.
So
Oh, may I just, before I forget, I just want to say, I'm working with Genesee Transportation Council about getting pedestrian counters back. Remember, I put them on the bridge for a while? I've got, at the end of this week, I've got one going in at Thomas Creek where the bikes come off the canalway. The counters are more improved now. They can discern between a pedestrian and a bike, which is great. I've also offered to the village that I have 2 more, and I've suggested that they want to consider putting them just after the split on the canalway where they're, putting pedestrians down and bikes to the left. So I'm hopeful that they'll take me up on that. Speaking of data, we like data. So,
okay, so tell us about the website.
Leslie White's been doing a tremendous job keeping me off the ledge. And we're making great progress. However, Leslie, maybe you want to weigh in?
Well, when we started the website project and we engaged Black Dog, our timeline was aggressive, didn't leave a lot of time, didn't leave any room for slack or any delay along the way. And we've encountered a few. So our goal of having the website up and operational before today was obviously not met. And I think we're probably going to need another 4 or 5 weeks to get this moving, middle of July-ish. We've got, we've had delays. Our process of getting photography probably should have started a month before it did. The photographer's been out here. He's taken pictures. We've negotiated things we liked, didn't like, places to go. People aren't home. They're on vacation. They're having babies. The businesses are not available at the time. Sometimes they're too packed to have a photographer that representing in there. So I think there is no pressing deadline beyond the one we set ourselves for pushing this up, other than the fact that we're dying to share everything as quickly as possible. It's not like there's any major canal conference or business event that makes us have to have it now. I know that sounds like I'm.
So does that go for branding as well? Or, the whole package, or are we talking just the website?
The web, I mean, the branding is, I mean, we're gonna moving it forward.
Yeah,
As it is, the website's probably the most visible thing that people will see, beyond maybe our new posters, you know, the signs that go up in the businesses. But absolutely, we can, you know, roll out the branding as slowly or quickly as we do.
But that also, that includes social media too?
The social media some of the channels are up there. They're starting to be used. That's not the right word that I want in my head, but there's starting to be content going up on them. And we've expanded the number of channels we've got. I mean, we've had, you know, Martha running Twitter. Now we're adding Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and a steady YouTube channel. And somebody's got to manage that. Somebody's got to know who's following, you know, what's the audience that we're engaging on these different platforms. And Black Dog, on an interim basis for the first couple of months, we're suggesting that they manage that because they're also heavily involved with all of the content we're putting on the website and all of our branding. And that gives us enough time to find somebody local who can step in and do that for us. So this is just a stopgap.
I think it makes sense to hold off a big push on social till the website's done. You know, because you're going to drive them to your website through social, so you kind of want that to be ready. Anyways.
Just an update. We're not voting.
So then we have a proposal from Black Dog.
Correct.
For the
On an
additional time. to
Interim
manage it.
basis.
Yeah.
And what it does is establishes the brand that we've spent a lot of time developing. And it's not a commitment for 3 months either. I
And
asked
what was the
them.
price?
1,800
Yes.
with a 500 for the boosting.
Yeah.
Right. We already boosted a couple of, our survey out there, and we're getting responses, which is great. We're getting responses from people that don't know us, which is a good thing. And then we'll be able to measure next year, do they know us? So, yeah, so that's the social media proposal, and it's 3 months is proposed, but it's not a contract for 3 months.
So did they start now, or did they start like Jennifer saying?
Like, for example,
Once the website goes.
oh no, we've started it now. And we did the post with regard to the marketing award and that type of thing. There are things I'm holding in check, waiting. When we'll be having our facade improvements, our front porch grant. We hosted State Senator Sanders and showed him the accessible kayak that we bought, et cetera. We've got a lot of content that can go out. So I'm hopeful that
So,
you'll consider this.
so now programs like the facade improvement grant, does that mean they're gonna be? Or are we waiting until the website's up before we?
No.
No.
We don't need to refer people to the website for that, or do online? Or,
I can.
Well, we have a website now. It's not going to be as branded and as beautiful, but in a month it will be.
But I can also, probably by a QR code, direct them directly to our application, which has our new branding on it, for example. So I can, yes.
The website shouldn't stop us from doing anything.
Okay.
I mean, we have a website now. We're launching the branding. The website is going to be an evolving process, whether we started today or started in the middle of July. It's constantly going to be changing as we do.
So was that a motion you made to?
Yes, it is a motion made to use Black Dog on a temporary basis for managing social media.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And the last matter is Ed's notice policy.
Yep, so currently, the state requires any notices that go out to the affected taxing jurisdiction be mailed out by essentially return receipt requested. And there's usually 8 or 9 different groups that you can go on. So it's an arduous process. So the state agreed for 2 types of notices. That would be if you change the uniform tax bill policy, or when you pass a resolution related to providing any tax benefits, that those notices now can be sent, copies of those resolution or the UTEP can be sent out by read receipt email. So that's it.
Oh,
So this allows you to do that. So,
Nice.
Motion to adopt that policy.
So,
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any further IDA business? Motion to adjourn? Anyone?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Good. Middle.